The alien market was alive with noise, lights, and strange smells. Tall aliens with shining scales walked beside creatures with 4 arms and glowing eyes. Merchants shouted about rare spices, glowing fruits, and metal parts from forgotten worlds. Everywhere, voices mixed together, but nobody noticed the small figure hiding near the stalls. She was a little alien girl, no taller than a human child. Her skin was pale blue, her big eyes wet with fear. She looked left and right trying to find help, but the busy aliens passed her like she was invisible. At the same time, a human traveler named Daniel walked into the market. He had been moving from one alien village to another, searching for work. His backpack was heavy with tools, his boots dusty from the long road. For him, the alien market was another strange but normal place. Yet today, something unusual was waiting for him. The little alien girl spotted him. She froze for a second as if unsure. Then she ran forward and pulled on his hand. Her small voice trembled as she cried, "Please, mighty human. My sister was taken. Let's rescue her together." Daniel stopped at once. He had faced many odd things in alien lands, but never this. The girl's words cut through the crowd like a sharp blade. Some aliens nearby turned their heads, but quickly looked away. It was as if they wanted nothing to do with her. Daniel looked down at her. Her tiny fingers gripped his hand tightly, her eyes full of tears. He knelt so their eyes were level and spoke softly. "Slow down, little one. What happened? Who took your sister?" The girl shook her head quickly, her voice shaking. "Dark guards, the ones with iron masks, they came from the fortress. They grabbed her while we were selling flowers in the street. Nobody helped us. Nobody even tried." Her voice broke and she pressed her hands against her face. Daniel felt something stir inside him. He remembered when he was a child on Earth, watching his younger cousin cry after bullies had taken his toy. Back then, Daniel had stepped in. Even though he was smaller than the bullies now, the memory pushed him again. This girl's pain was real, and her sister was somewhere in danger. Still, he was careful. The market was busy, and he noticed how the other aliens refused to meet his eyes. He asked the girl, "Why does nobody help you? Why are they silent?" Her reply came in a whisper, almost too soft to hear. "They fear the fortress guards. Anyone who speaks is punished. My sister is gone, and I am too small to fight them. But you are human, strong, and brave. I have heard stories." Daniel felt the weight of her words. Humans had a strange reputation among aliens. Some called them reckless, some called them dangerous. But here, to this little girl, human meant hope, and hope was something he could not ignore. He stood up, looking around. "Where did they take her?" he asked firmly. The girl pointed toward the distant hills beyond the market walls. There, dark towers stood like jagged teeth against the sky. A fortress, ancient, cold, and full of shadows. Daniel followed her finger with his eyes. The sight of the fortress filled him with unease. It was not just stone and metal. It looked alive, like something waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to step inside. The girl tugged on his hand again. "Please, mighty human, you will help me, won't you?" Daniel took a deep breath. He was only one man, and he knew the danger. But he could not push this child away, not when she had no one else to turn to. "I'll help you," he said at last, his voice steady. "But you must tell me everything, every detail about the guards, the way they came, and how we can reach the fortress. If we are going to do this, we will need a plan." The girl's eyes widened, filled with sudden hope. Her small head nodded quickly. She wiped her tears with her sleeve and tried to speak clearly. "I will tell you everything I know. I saw the way they carried her. I saw which gate they used. I can show you." For the first time, a tiny smile touched her lips. In the middle of the alien market, surrounded by uncaring strangers, a human had said yes. A bond had been formed, fragile but powerful. Daniel knew the coming night would not be easy. Danger waited in the shadows of the fortress. But as he looked at the little girl's trembling hands, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt purpose. And so, with the market fading behind them, the human and the little alien girl stepped toward the unknown. The story of their rescue had just begun, and the fortress in the hills was waiting for them both. The sun dipped lower. In the alien sky, painting the clouds with strange green and silver colors, Daniel walked beside the little alien girl, her small steps quick and nervous. The noise of the market faded behind them, replaced by silence and the occasional cry of night birds. Every sound made the girl flinch, but she did not stop leading the way. Her name, Daniel learned, was Lyra. She whispered it shyly when he asked, her voice trembling. "Lyra, and my sister is Arya," she said, clutching her hands together. Daniel repeated the name softly in his head, reminding himself this was not just a rescue. This was about two real lives. As they moved through the narrow alleys behind the market, Daniel noticed something strange. There were marks on the ground. Deep imprints like heavy boots had pressed into the dirt. Beside them, faint drag lines scratched into the dust. He stopped and crouched, brushing his fingers over the marks. "They carried someone," he muttered. "Your sister was dragged. This way." Lyra nodded quickly, her eyes wide. "Yes, I saw them." They covered her mouth. She was crying, but no one dared to help. Her voice cracked, and Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Lyra. You remembered the way. That means we have a chance." They followed the trail through winding alleys and broken walls. The deeper they went, the fewer people they saw. Shadows grew thicker, and the smell of smoke drifted from distant fires. It felt like they were walking out of safety and into a place the world had forgotten. Soon they reached the edge of the village, where broken stone roads led toward the dark hills. There, the boot marks became harder to see. The ground was rocky, covered with weeds and strange glowing plants. Daniel crouched again, scanning carefully. His human eyes were not as sharp in the dark, but his mind was trained to notice patterns. "There," he said, pointing to a patch of bent grass. They took her uphill toward the fortress. Lyra followed his gaze, fear tightening her small face. Her hands shook, but she nodded. "I knew it. But I was too scared to follow alone." They began the climb, the path twisting through rocks and thorny bushes. The fortress loomed above them like a giant shadow, its towers cutting into the sky. Torches burned faintly near its walls, and Daniel could already hear faint sounds, boots on stone, the echo of distant voices. Every step brought the danger closer. As they climbed, Daniel tried to keep Lyra's mind focused. "Tell me about these guards," he said. "What do you know of them? Why do they take people?" Lyra bit her lip, her voice almost a whisper. "They are called the Iron Masks. They serve the warden of the fortress. They take the weak, the poor, anyone no one will miss. Some say the taken are sold as slaves, others say they are never seen again. Arya, she was strong, she tried to fight, but they were too many." Daniel listened carefully, every word painting a darker picture. He had seen cruelty before, but this felt worse, organized, merciless, and hidden behind fear. The more he learned, the stronger his resolve grew. The trail curved around a rocky outcrop, and Daniel stopped suddenly, raising a hand. Ahead, he saw movement. Two guards in iron masks were standing near a fire. Their armor was black, their helmets faceless, only glowing slits for eyes. They carried long spears with crackling tips that hissed like static. Lyra froze, holding her breath. Her small hand gripped Daniel's arm tightly. He leaned close and whispered, "Stay low. Do not make a sound." From their hiding spot behind the rocks, Daniel studied the guards. They were watching the path, but their stance was lazy. Clearly, they did not expect anyone foolish enough to follow. Still, one wrong move could give them away. Daniel searched the ground and spotted broken branches and loose stones. An idea formed quickly in his mind. He picked up a stone and threw it far to the left. The clatter echoed, and both guards turned sharply toward the sound, spears ready. Daniel took the chance, pulling Lyra past the outpost as silently as possible. Her small feet barely touched the ground, her breath fast and shallow. When they were finally clear, Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes. "You tricked them." "Just like that," she whispered, amazed. Daniel gave a small smile. "Sometimes strength isn't about fighting. It's about thinking." The path grew steeper, the fortress now directly above them. Its gates were massive, carved with old, alien symbols. Strange lights flickered from within like fire and lightning mixed together. The air felt heavy, as if the place itself wanted to crush their spirits. Lyra stopped, staring at the gates with fear. Her voice shook. "This is it. They took her through there." She clutched Daniel's sleeve, desperate. "They will hurt her. Please, we must hurry." Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "We will get her back. I promise," he said. But deep inside, he knew the hardest part was only beginning. Behind those gates waited the Iron Masks, the Warden, and whatever dark secrets they guarded. The trail had led them this far, but the real test of courage was still ahead. The fortress was no longer just a shadow on the hill. It was a monster waiting to be faced. And Daniel, with only his wits and a little girl's trust, was about to step into its jaws. The fortress stood above them like a sleeping beast. Its black stone walls rose high into the alien sky. Torches burned on the battlements, their flames fighting against the night. Strange banners marked with red symbols swayed in the cold wind. Daniel and Lyra crouched behind a cluster of rocks, watching. The girl's hand shook as she whispered, "They keep prisoners inside. My sister is in there, I know it." Her eyes glistened with fear, but also with hope. She had followed the trail this far, and now only the fortress walls stood between her and Arya. Daniel studied the place carefully. He had seen fortresses on Earth in history books, castles from ancient times, but this one felt different. Alien, cruel, alive in some strange way. Every corner seemed to breathe with secrets. Every shadow felt like an eye watching. The gates were massive, guarded by two armored figures in iron masks. Their spears crackled with faint energy, buzzing like angry insects. Behind them, the gates were locked with a heavy chain glowing faintly. It was not ordinary metal. It pulsed as if alive. Daniel frowned, knowing he could not fight through the front. "We need another way in," he whispered. Lyra pointed to the side of the fortress, where old stone met jagged rocks. "There are tunnels," she said, her voice trembling. "Old ones, used long ago. I heard the villagers speak of them, but they fear to go there. Some say ghosts guard the tunnels, others say monsters." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Ghosts or not, tunnels are better than walking into those spears." He squeezed her shoulder, gently. "Stay close to me." They moved silently along the rocks, each step careful. The torches above flickered, casting long shadows. Every time a guard shifted on the wall, Lyra held her breath. Daniel stayed calm, his eyes sharp, his body low. He had learned long ago that fear was natural, but control of fear was survival. At last they reached a dark opening near the base of the fortress. It was half hidden by vines and broken stones. The air that drifted from it was cold and damp. Carrying the smell of mold and something metallic, Lyra shivered. "This is it," she whispered. "The forgotten way." Daniel crouched, peering inside. The tunnel stretched into blackness, stone walls glistening with moisture. It looked narrow, but just wide enough for them to crawl. He nodded once. "We go." Inside, the tunnel swallowed them in darkness. Daniel lit a small glow stick from his pack, its pale light pushing back the shadows. The walls were rough, carved long ago. Strange. Carvings covered the stone, symbols of claws, eyes, and cages. Lyra touched one with trembling fingers. "These are old warnings. They meant this place for fear." The deeper they went, the colder it grew. Drops of water fell from the ceiling, echoing like soft footsteps. At times, the tunnel widened, revealing broken doors leading to small chambers. Inside, rusted chains hung from the walls, bones lay scattered, long forgotten. Lyra pressed against Daniel's side, trying not to cry, but Daniel's mind was sharp, focused. He noted the direction of airflow, the way the dampness shifted. "There's an exit ahead," he said quietly. "Maybe it leads into the fortress itself." After what felt like hours, they reached a staircase that spiraled upward. At the top, faint light leaked through cracks. Daniel pressed his ear against the old door and listened. Muffled voices echoed. "Guards." Speaking in a harsh alien tongue, he turned to Lyra, placing a finger on his lips. She nodded quickly, her big eyes locked on him. Slowly, Daniel pushed the door open just enough to see. They had emerged inside the fortress walls, into a shadowed corridor. The ceiling was high, lined with flickering alien lanterns. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of smoke and something darker. Fear. From far away, Daniel heard faint cries, voices of prisoners echoing through stone. Lyra gasped softly, covering her mouth. "My sister. She must be here," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but Daniel's heart hardened. He had promised, and now the time to act had come. Moving low, they slipped from shadow to shadow. The corridor twisted, opening into a hall filled with cages. Figures huddled inside, thin and broken, their eyes hollow. Some were alien children, some were older, but all carried the same look of despair. Daniel's chest tightened. This was worse than he imagined. He turned to Lyra, whispering, "Do you see her?" She scanned the cages, her face pale, her hands gripping the bars of her courage. But before she could answer, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Daniel grabbed her and pulled her behind a pillar. 2 iron mask guards entered, dragging another prisoner. The prisoner cried out weakly, his voice muffled by a gag. The guards laughed coldly, throwing him into an empty cage. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed like thunder in the silent hall. Daniel's jaw clenched. He felt the urge to strike them down, but he knew now was not the moment. This was not about one fight. This was about survival, rescue, and timing. The guards left, their footsteps fading. Daniel and Lyra stepped out from the shadows again. Her eyes darted from cage to cage, desperate. "Aria, Aria," she whispered. But no answer came. Only the sound of distant cries. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We will find her," he said firmly. But deep inside, he knew the fortress was a labyrinth of shadows, and every step they took would bring them closer to discovery. Still, he had made a promise, and promises for him were stronger than fear. As the shadows closed around them, the hunt for Aria had truly begun, and the fortress, alive with secrets, waited to test the strength of one human and one desperate little girl. The fortress breathed with silence and danger. Every hallway stretched long and empty. Yet Daniel felt eyes everywhere. The walls glowed, faintly with alien markings pulsing like veins under skin. It was not just a prison. It was alive with secrets. Daniel moved slowly, his steps careful, his ears sharp. Beside him, Lyra held her breath as if even the sound of air would give them away. Her small hands clutched the fabric of his jacket, her eyes wide and alert. She whispered softly, "My sister is close. I can feel it." The corridor split into 3 paths. One led deeper into the fortress where faint cries echoed. Another led upward toward the guard barracks. The last curved downward into a dark passage with dripping sounds. Daniel stopped, studying each path like a hunter tracking prey. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. On Earth, he had learned to trust small details, the way air flowed, the way sound carried. Now he listened. From below came the smell of wet, stone and chains. From the center, a faint flicker of lanterns, and from above, heavy footsteps. His decision was clear. "We go down," he whispered, pointing to the lower passage. Lyra's face turned pale, but she nodded. Together they slipped into the shadows, the air growing colder with each step. The dripping sound grew louder, echoing like falling tears. The walls narrowed, pressing close around them. At last, the passage opened into a vast chamber lit by blue flames. Daniel froze, pulling Lyra behind. A broken pillar. In the center of the chamber stood 3 iron mask guards. They circled around a table covered in chains and weapons. Their voices were deep and harsh, speaking in the alien tongue. Daniel could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. This was a guard post. Lyra's hands trembled as she pointed to a side door behind the guards. "That way," she whispered. I saw them take prisoners there before. That's where she might be. Daniel's jaw tightened. 3 guards, too many for a direct fight. He looked around the chamber, searching. The blue flames flickered in tall bowls along the walls. Above, chains hung loosely from the ceiling. Like vines of metal, an idea sparked in his mind. He leaned close to Lyra, whispering, "Stay here no matter what. When I give the sign, run for that door." Her big eyes filled with fear, but she nodded quickly, trusting him. Daniel crawled silently along the edge of the chamber, every movement slow, precise. His human body was not the strongest, but he knew how to use silence as a weapon. He reached one of the tall bowls of blue flame and carefully loosened it from its stand. With a push, he tipped it over. The bowl crashed onto the floor, the flame scattering into sparks. The noise echoed like thunder in the chamber. The guards spun around instantly, their glowing eyes narrowing. One shouted, another pointed his spear toward the sound, but the chamber was large, shadows deep. They did not notice Daniel slipping through the darkness behind them. He reached the chains hanging from the ceiling, pulling one loose. It fell with a loud clatter, drawing the guards closer. Their heavy boots echoed as they investigated. Now all 3 were distracted, clustered near the noise. Daniel raised his hand, waving quickly toward Lyra. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she ran. Her small feet carried her silently across the floor. She slipped past the distracted guards and darted through the side door. Daniel followed close behind, his breath steady, but sharp inside. The air was heavier. Rows of cells lined the walls, dim lanterns casting weak light. Figures stirred behind the bars, whispering, crying. Their thin faces lifted as Daniel and Lyra entered. Hope flickered in their hollow eyes. They had not seen outsiders before. Lyra rushed to the bars, her hands gripping the cold metal. "Arya," she whispered urgently. "Arya, are you here?" Her voice echoed through the chamber. For a moment, only silence answered. Then, from the far corner, a weak but familiar voice spoke. "Lyra." Her eyes filled with tears, her small body shaking with relief. "Arya, it's me. I brought help." She pointed toward Daniel, who stood watch near the doorway. Her sister, weak and chained, lifted her head slowly. Her eyes widened when she saw the human. Daniel quickly scanned the corridor behind them. The guards would return soon, and when they found the distraction empty, they would search. He hurried to Arya's cell, pulling at the lock. It was thick alien metal covered in strange runes. He cursed under his breath. "Not simple." Arya's voice was hoarse, but strong enough to whisper. "They keep the keys on the high table, near the guard post." Daniel's mind raced. Going back to the guard post meant danger, but there was no choice. He turned to Lyra, speaking quickly. "Stay with your sister. Do not make a sound. I'll return." Lyra grabbed his hand desperately. "No. They'll catch you." Daniel gave a small, steady smile. "They won't. Humans don't get caught that easily." With that, he slipped back into the shadows. The fortress walls seemed to close in tighter. Every sound was a risk, every step a gamble, but Daniel's resolve was firm. He had seen Arya, and now he would not leave without her. Behind him, Lyra whispered softly to her sister. "Hold on. The mighty human will save us." The fortress did not know it yet, but the silent infiltration had just begun. And in the quiet shadows, one human was about to challenge an empire of fear. The prison hall smelled of damp stone and rusted iron. Weak lanterns flickered, throwing trembling shadows on the walls. Behind one of the cages, Arya, the older sister, sat slumped, chains binding her wrists and ankles. Her pale skin glowed faintly in the dim light. Her eyes tired but sharp. Lyra pressed her small hands against the bars, tears running down her cheeks. "Arya, I'm here, I didn't leave you," she whispered. Arya lifted her head slowly, her lips parting in disbelief. "Lyra, how? You should have run. They would have taken you too." Lyra shook her head, her voice breaking. "I couldn't leave you. I found him. A human." She turned and pointed toward Daniel, who had returned silently with a ring of heavy keys in his hand. Arya's eyes widened at the sight of him. A human. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with quiet confidence. She had heard rumors of humans, reckless, dangerous, sometimes saviors, sometimes destroyers. But now, in this dark prison, the human was her only hope. Daniel approached the bars, his face calm but firm. "Don't worry, we're getting you out," he said simply. His voice carried weight, steady and sure. It was not just words, it was a promise. He tried the first key, but it didn't fit. The second scraped, then clicked halfway before jamming. The chains rattled. As Arya tried to move, her strength almost gone, Daniel clenched his jaw and muttered, "Damn. Stay still, I'll find the right one." Lyra glanced nervously at the door. The sound of armored footsteps echoed faintly from the corridors, growing louder. "They're coming," she whispered in panic. "We don't have time." Daniel worked, faster, his hands steady despite the urgency. The third key slipped, useless. The fourth slid in smoothly, turning with a satisfying click. The lock snapped open and the heavy bars creaked as Daniel pulled the cage door wide. Arya stumbled forward, weak from days in chains. Her legs trembled, but Daniel caught her before she could fall. His strong arms held her steady, and for the first time in days she felt safe. You risked this for me?" she whispered, looking at him in disbelief. Daniel only gave a faint smile. "Your sister asked me, and I don't break promises." The chain still bound her wrists and ankles. Daniel dropped to one knee, working quickly to free her. Each shackle opened with another loud click, the sound sharp in the silent hall. At last, the final chain fell away, clattering against the stone floor, but the sound carried far, too far. The footsteps outside grew louder, faster. The iron masks were returning. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He grabbed Arya's arm gently but firmly, pulling her to her feet. "Can you walk?" he asked. Arya winced, her body weak, but she nodded. "I'll try," she whispered, determination flashing in her tired eyes. Lyra grabbed her sister's hand tightly, refusing to let go. For a moment, the two sisters embraced, tears falling, silently. It was short-lived, because the heavy door at the end of the hall suddenly burst open. 3 iron mask guards stormed inside, their glowing eyes locking onto the scene. One shouted in their harsh alien tongue. The others raised their spears. Blue sparks crackled at the tips, filling the air with menace. "Move!" Daniel shouted, pushing the sisters toward the side passage. The guards charged, their boots pounding against the floor. The prisoners in the other cells screamed, rattling their chains. The hall filled with chaos, noise bouncing off the walls. Daniel grabbed a broken chain from the ground and swung it with force. The heavy iron link struck one guard's spear, knocking it aside. The sparks sizzled harmlessly into the air. The second guard lunged, but Daniel ducked low, pulling Arya and Lyra with him. They stumbled through the side passage, the human shielding them with his body. The guards roared in, anger chasing them into the narrow corridor. Daniel's mind raced. Fighting them here would be suicide. They needed to outsmart them, just like before. He spotted a crumbling pillar halfway down the corridor. Its stones were cracked. Barely. "Holding, keep running," he told the sisters. Then he kicked the base of the pillar with all his strength. The old stone shifted, groaned, and collapsed with a crash. Dust filled the passage as rocks tumbled down, blocking the guard's path. The sisters turned back, eyes wide. "You stopped them," Lyra gasped. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow, his chest rising and falling. "For now," he said, "but they'll find another way. We need to move before the whole fortress comes down on us." They hurried deeper into the dark passage. The air was thick with dust, their lungs burning. Arya stumbled, her legs weak, but Daniel supported her without slowing. He carried her weight as if it were nothing, his eyes sharp on the path ahead. Behind them, the muffled sound of guards shouting grew distant, but it was clear. The fortress knew intruders were inside now. The silent infiltration was over. The hunt had begun. At last, the passage opened into a small chamber, dimly lit by a single torch. They stopped for a moment, catching their breath. Arya leaned against the wall, her hands shaking but her eyes alive again. "Lyra, you found me," she whispered, pulling her sister into her arms. The two clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces. For them, even 1 minute together was worth everything. Daniel stood nearby, watching silently. A small part of him wanted to give them time, but the fortress walls groaned with danger, and he knew this was only the beginning. "We're not safe yet," he said firmly. "We have to get out before the fortress swallows us whole." The sisters nodded, their tears turning into determination. Together, the three of them stepped forward into the unknown, chased by shadows carrying the weight of hope. And behind them, the fortress stirred with fury. The chains had been broken, but freedom was still far away. The chamber trembled with distant echoes. The fortress was awake now, no longer silent. Alarms sounded, deep horns that shook the stone walls, the iron. Masks knew their prisoners had been freed. Daniel stood with Lyra and Arya at the center of the small room. The older sister leaned heavily against him, still weak but fighting to stay on her feet. Lyra clutched her sister's hand tightly, refusing to let go. Her eyes darted nervously at the cracks in the stone where voices echoed. "They're searching," Arya whispered. Her voice was hoarse, but her mind clear. "They will lock the fortress down. There will be no easy way out." Daniel's jaw clenched. "There was never going to be an easy way," he muttered. He scanned the chamber quickly, spotting another passage leading downward. He pointed. "That way, we take the underground. If we reach the river tunnels, we might escape." The sisters followed, their footsteps light but hurried. The passage twisted sharply, torches flickering against the walls. Every corner felt like a trap waiting to spring. The sound of armored boots grew louder behind them. The iron masks were closing in. At one point, they reached a stairwell that spiraled down into darkness. Daniel paused, listening. The horns above faded into the distance, replaced by dripping water and rushing echoes. "We're close," he whispered. "The river is near." But before they could move, shadows shifted above them. 3 guards appeared at the top of the stairs, their glowing eyes locking onto the fugitives. One pointed his spear, electricity crackling at the tip. "Run!" Daniel barked, pushing the sisters down the stairs. The guards charged, their heavy boots clanging against stone. Daniel grabbed a loose torch from the wall and swung it in a wide arc. The flames forced the first guard to stumble back. The second lunged, but Daniel kicked him hard in the chest, sending him tumbling. The third swung his spear, sparks slicing the air. Daniel ducked just in time, the heat searing his cheek. "Go!" he shouted again. Lyra and Arya raced down, their breaths quick and sharp. Daniel fought just long enough to buy them space. Then he turned and sprinted after them, the guards' angry shouts echoing behind. The stairwell ended in a wide cavern. Water roared below, a dark underground river flowing fast and furious. A narrow stone bridge crossed it, slick with moss and broken in places. The only way across, Daniel led the sisters onto the bridge. Every step was dangerous, the stones slippery underfoot. The river below churned with deadly force. One wrong step would mean certain death. Halfway across, the fortress shook with another horn blast. Iron mask guards poured into the cavern behind. Their glowing spears lit the dark like lightning. "Faster!" Daniel urged, pulling Arya along. The guards charged onto the bridge, their heavy armor clanging, their weight shaking the fragile stones. Chunks of rock crumbled, splashing into the raging river below. The bridge would not hold. For long, Daniel glanced ahead, spotting the far side. A jagged tunnel mouth leading into the wild outside. Freedom, if they could reach it. "Just a little more," he called, his voice filled with grit. Suddenly, one of the guards hurled his spear. It crackled through the air like lightning. Daniel twisted, pushing Lyra aside. The spear struck the stone where she had stood, exploding in sparks. The shockwave cracked the bridge further. Arya stumbled, nearly falling. Daniel caught her, hauling her back with strength he did not know he had left. "Keep moving," he shouted. Lyra helped, gripping her sister's other arm, together dragging her forward. The guards were almost upon them now, their glowing eyes fierce, their weapons raised. Daniel made a quick choice. He spun, grabbed another loose chain from his pack, and swung it wide. The chain caught the legs of the lead guard, sending him crashing onto the crumbling stones. The weight was too much. The middle of the bridge split open, collapsing into the river. The guards behind shouted in panic as the broken section fell. Several plunged into the river, their armor dragging them under. The rest staggered back to safety. Cut off from the fugitives, Daniel and the sisters raced across the final stretch of the bridge. The stone groaned beneath their feet, but they reached the other side. They collapsed against the wall of the tunnel, gasping for breath. For a brief moment, there was silence. Only the roar of the river behind. Lyra clutched Arya tightly, sobbing with relief. "We made it. We really made it," she whispered. Arya, weak but smiling faintly, whispered back, "Because of him," she said, her eyes turning to Daniel. The human stood tall, his chest rising and falling, his eyes sharp as steel, but Daniel shook his head. "This isn't over. They'll send more. The fortress won't rest until you're caught again." He looked deeper into the tunnel, the cold night air drifting in from beyond. "That way. That's freedom. We move before dawn." The sisters nodded, determination replacing fear. Together, the three of them stepped into the darkness of the wild beyond the fortress. Behind them, the horns of the iron masks echoed one last time, a promise that the hunt was not finished. Yet in that moment, the human had done what no alien dared. He had broken chains, crossed rivers, and stood against fear itself. The great escape had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The night was cold, the air sharp with the scent of pine and stone. Daniel led the two sisters through the wild hills beyond the fortress. The underground tunnel had opened into a rocky path under the stars. Above them, the alien sky glowed with green and silver streaks. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath after their escape. Arya leaned heavily on Daniel's arm, her body weak but her spirit refusing to break. Lyra walked close, her small hand never letting go of her sister's. The fortress horn still echoed faintly in the distance, but each step forward carried them further from chains and closer to freedom. At last, they reached the edge of the alien village. Faint lanterns glimmered in the market where it had all begun, the same market where Lyra had pulled Daniel's hand and begged for help. Now she walked beside him with her sister safe, her eyes shining with hope. The villagers stirred as they arrived. Alien merchants, workers, and elders gathered in silence. Their eyes widened when they saw the human leading the two sisters. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. "Impossible. Someone escaped the fortress. A human did this?" For years the Iron Masks had ruled with fear. No one had ever dared to defy them. No one had ever returned from the fortress alive. Yet here stood Arya, alive though weak, held up by the stranger no one trusted before. Lyra faced the crowd, her voice trembling but strong. "He saved us," she shouted, her small chest rising with pride. "No one listened when I begged, no one cared when they took my sister, but this human, he risked everything. He broke her chains, he fought the Iron Masks. We are free because of him." The crowd gasped, their whispers turning into uneasy murmurs. Some lowered their eyes in shame. They remembered ignoring the girl's cries in the market. They remembered walking away while she begged for help. Now, guilt weighed heavy in their hearts. Daniel stood silent, his gaze steady. He had not done it for glory or thanks, he had done it because a child asked and he could not walk away. Still, seeing the villagers' eyes change from doubt to respect stirred something inside him. Arya, though weak, lifted her head and spoke softly. Her voice carried in the quiet night. "My sister is alive because of him. I am alive because of him. I will never forget this. And neither should you." The villagers bowed their heads, some in respect, some in shame. For the first time they saw a human not as a reckless outsider, but as someone who stood against fear when no one else dared. Lyra tugged on Daniel's sleeve, her big eyes filled with gratitude. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You said we would get her back, and we did." Daniel smiled faintly, resting a hand on her head. "Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths," he said. "And you were brave enough to speak." Arya leaned against her sister, her tired eyes glistening. "You could have left. You could have walked away, but you stayed." "Why?" she asked. Daniel's eyes turned to the distant fortress, its dark towers still looming against the sky. "Because no one else would," he replied simply. "Sometimes being human means standing when everyone else is afraid to." Silence fell over the crowd. Those words struck deep, cutting through years of fear and hesitation. The villagers realized something they had long forgotten, that courage was not about strength of arms, but strength of will. Slowly, one elder stepped forward. His scales shimmered in the lantern light as he bowed to Daniel. "You have done what none of us dared," the elder said. "From this night, you are not just a traveler, you are a protector." The villagers lowered their heads in respect. And for the first time since arriving in the alien world, Daniel felt he was not just passing through. He belonged, not as an outsider, but as someone who had earned trust. Lyra and Arya clung to him, their bond unbreakable now. The little sister who had begged in the market, the older sister freed from chains, and the human who had answered a plea when no one else would. Together, they had faced shadows, broken chains, and crossed rivers of death together. They had proved that hope could rise even in the darkest fortress. And together they had forged something stronger than fear. A new bond, woven in trust, courage, and sacrifice. As the dawn broke over the alien hills, light spilled across the village, chasing away the shadows of the night. The fortress still stood in the distance, but its power felt weaker, its fear shaken, because one human had shown that even in a galaxy of silence, the voice of courage could never be chained. And so, the story of Daniel, Lyra, and Arya spread beyond the village. A tale whispered in markets, sung in taverns, a tale of the mighty human who listened to a child's plea and changed everything.